So again, this is a little bit of refresh from the previous Introduction to DevOps course, but I think you can't really talk about continuous delivery without understanding the value stream. So here again, we've covered this in a lot more detail in the Introduction to DevOps. If you need a refresher there, I'm going to kind of spin through it pretty quick to make sure we're on the same page before we get into the kind of meat of continuous delivery. So understanding the value stream is, sequence of activities an organization undertakes to deliver upon a customer request. Pretty obvious. The sequence of activities: design, produce, deliver service to a customer. Okay, basic. There's some great books by Mike Rother, Learning to See, Karen Martin and Mike Osterling on value stream mapping, and again Damon Edwards and Simplify Ops, really really good on or DTO Solutions on value stream mapping. So one of the things that we learned a lot from Lean, and we try to look at, so if we're going to build a continuous delivery pipeline and flow, right, we really need to understand some data points, and particularly, what's the difference between, say, lead time and cycle time. Now, mileage varies on these definitions, so even in the Agile and the Lean community, you'll find, even in the Lean manufacturing community, and again, in the previous course, I went through a little bit of the history of how we went from Toyota to Lean manufacturing to Lean software development to just all variations of Lean. But you'll find that like even different authors will kind of differ on what lead time means. We're going to try to be consistent here, and that it's what it takes to get a piece of work all the way through the system. And kind of the clock starts when the request is made. In our world, that might be somebody saying, "Hey, can we, officially ask a request for a feature or a particular new solution?" And then it's over when the customer sees it, right? So in cycle time, again, here's where it gets a little hairy. Even in manufacturing, I've found that there's variance in what people consider where cycle time is. Here, we'll just, stay with me here. It's how often a part, this is actually Mike Rother's, again, who I think is a pretty good source, and Mike Rother's Toyota Kata is one of the, it's a highly recommended reading in the DevOps intro course. It basically, cycle time is, how often a part or product is computed by the process as time by observed. The clock starts when the work begins, when the item is ready for delivery. And cycle time is the more mechanical measure of the process capability. Here's where it gets interesting, right? Like in knowledge work, not too much different from manufacturing. If you stay with me on the difference between lead time and cycle, I don't care what your definition is. Just understand what they are from a measurement perspective and how you want to, optimize the flow of things. Basically, in manufacturing, it might be the start work would be the first, drill press or whatever, the car, the line of the car auto manufacturing, right? And the request might be all the design. We create a new car, a new Corvette. In knowledge work, same thing, really. If you follow my kind of definition, it's not just mine. There's other people's. It would be like all the time it took to come up with the idea and the code. And the start work would basically be like the time you kind of, checked it in to the system. Again, if there's arguments, and there have been actually, there's been not arguments but questions about this in the previous class in the Q&A FAQ. But again, I don't really care. I just care like if you're capturing the difference between the overall time and the time that it takes. And we'll get a little deeper here because we'll talk about what we did in the handbook, But basically, if you look at the value stream, like there's the creation of the idea, there's adding work to the backlog, there's creating user story, there's an implementation of the code, and then there's a check-in to version control, deploy to production, right? All that kind of stuff we're going to cover, and then there's this validation, right? But basically, what we're saying here, in general, is that the time that we really think about. And again, I'm not saying creating an idea and adding to the backlog and user story and implement a code is not important, but that's part of sort of maybe Agile, Scrum, and or even the Kanban metrics, right? That you get from just measuring Kanban. Again, I covered a lot. I didn't cover Scrum in Intro to DevOps, but I did cover Kanban pretty heavily. and relied on Domenico DeGrandis' stuff. But what we're going to really focus on here is really like the time it gets checked into version control, the deploy production, and so actually in the DevOps handbook we really kind of renamed this as design lead time and deployment lead time, and we kind of unapologetically said in this book we're going to focus on deployment lead time, right, which is really what I'm calling in the previous life cycle time. And so design lead time, again, not that it's not important. I think there's other courses in this, for development and agile and all that good stuff. But basically, anyway, design lead time, right? It's usually new work, it's uncertain estimates, outcome, it has high variability. Sorry. But we're, again, deployment lead time is where we really want to focus in on the kind of tool chain, the things that we know that we can improve from automation, testing, the repeatable functionality, repeatable processes, process times, should be reasonably predictable, right? We can start looking at stuff and try, we start getting into more exotic discussions later about what people do with security. Like they can look at how many security defects did you have on the last one, and have you increased? There's just tremendous things that people are doing with kind of some form of keeping data heuristics. So outcomes have lower variability. And then again the final kind of lead time. So again, we really want to focus in. Again, if we're going to build this pool chain, and we're not really going to talk about the reporting and the auditing, but there's some great stuff there that has to be done, because as you build these continuous delivery pipelines or these software delivery supply chains, if you will, the performance and the metrics and the monitoring and the logging and the auditing all matter. So you really need to figure out what your kind of lead time or deployment lead time is, and how you're going to track that. So. And again, Kanban does some really fabulous stuff on the whole flow, on a Kanban board, and some of the reporting that you can do.